One more AAC strategy to cover, which are speech-generating devices, and that will lead us right over into autism and AAC apps. When we talk about speech-generating devices, we usually refer to portable, computerized little devices that either produce synthetic or digitized speech output when they're activated. Typically, graphic symbols are used to represent messages, and they can be activated by a finger, by a switch, a head stick, or selecting a symbol from the display. Here are a couple popular options: the light wider, which we have seen before in the video clip, or the Big Mac switch to record a message that is then being played back by activation of that button. SGDs can come in many different other ways. Some are more portable than others, and there's a huge movement in the AAC community away from the dedicated devices onto using tablet devices that have just software on them that mimics a speech-generating device and turns that tablet into an SGD. Important to know about SGDs is that they can either come with a fixed display or with a dynamic display. With a fixed display, we're kind of a little bit limited in the amount of symbols that we can display at one time. We might have a limited vocabulary because that overlay here that stays as it is, we might be able to replace that with a different overlay, but that then requires that we create a new one and swap that. With dynamic displays, we can store larger vocabulary sets. The screen, the display would change with a new activation. I can go into a new category and have that screen completely reorganized. Very prominent in recent years in the larger AAC community is the idea of having a visual scene display. What that means is that language concepts are actually embedded into larger contextual scenes and ideas. Objects and events within the photograph are then used as symbols for communication. So here I have such a visual scene display. There is the context of the area, the town that I'm visiting, that I'm exploring as a tourist in the background, and then I have things within that city, prominent sites and attractions that I can then talk about. Right? And that could also be used in a dynamic display system, so I can put on different visual scenes for different contexts. For learners on the autism spectrum, particularly for those with severe autism, this, at least initially, may not be the ideal choice because of sensory processing difficulties. We'll talk about this in a little bit more in depth later on, but just for right now, understand that in autism, one of the larger cognitive and processing impairments is that for the autistic learner, it is very difficult to filter out the salient stimuli from a sensory-rich environment. So on this screen, there's so much going on, it's very busy, that the learner with autism might have more or less tremendous difficulty telling that this is just the background and that these are some of the symbols that actually do something in terms of generating speech output. Okay? Question?
What about folks with moderate autism? Wouldn't you,
So,
because I feel like for ASD, it's good for context dependence.
Exactly. For those folks, there are solutions. And Catherine, you just mentioned an app to me, Autism Mate, there where you use those visual scene displays and you can highlight what you want the autistic learner to look at. So there are particular software solutions where visual scene displays are still there, but you can add some more salient highlighting or circling or something around it to make the important graphic symbols really stick out and make them easier recognizable for those individuals, whether they are on the autism spectrum or have another developmental disability, that have these sensory processing difficulties. I would then go down that route if I had those learners where I find that having a visual scene display actually makes sense. All right. On your handout, there's a couple examples for a child using a speech-generating device, and if you wanted to listen to what a synthetic synthetic voice, what that sounds like, there's also an example. You can check that out, get an idea. Why would we want to choose speech-generating devices? Well, first of all, they allow us to compose more detailed messages, and they enable the user to communicate very precise requests, and that way they might prevent communication breakdown. It's easier to be understood, you're highly intelligible even to unfamiliar communication partners with that speech-generating device. Research has suggested there might be an advantage in having this additional speech model coming from the device. The individual is selecting the graphic symbol, the device speaks it out, and that might facilitate language comprehension. Producing speech can be perceived as more natural than using manual signs or just pointing to a communication board. Can increase intelligibility, and it's easier to get attention. You can increase the volume in a setting where you want to reach someone who's further away, and there's a higher likelihood to receiving a listener response. A huge movement currently, I'm sure you're all aware of this, towards using iPads and other tablet devices. Some strong arguments for those are these devices are lightweight and portable. They tend to be very cost efficient compared to dedicated speech generating devices. They are fairly easy to program, intuitively to use. Also highly motivating to use because kids are usually drawn towards this interface. It's highly appealing to them. Lots of graphic symbols around there. Not too difficult to understand the concept, how to touch, activate graphic symbols on the screen. It might even be socially appealing and enhance peer acceptance because the learner with autism looks kind of cool, can easier make peer connections if he or she walks into a classroom with an iPad and other kids get to join in and also play with that iPad. So those are all arguments that have been suggested why that is a proper choice. What is the empirical evidence that speaks for speech-generating devices? And again, we have a number of these larger research syntheses, research reviews that have already aggregated the individual studies. And those reviews tell us the following. In the first one in 2010, they found 23 studies with a total of 51 children between the ages of 3 to 16 years. And positive outcomes were reported for 86% of those studies and individuals. Often, again, the targeted skill was requesting. And this review is arriving at the conclusion this is a potential effective option for teaching communication skills on the autism spectrum. A later study had different inclusion criteria and looked at only the very best studies, was even more restrictive than this review, and found 8 studies on speech-generating devices, 9 studies on PECs, and 7 on related graphic symbols that weren't necessarily marketed as part of a specific instructional system. And the effect sizes, the estimations of how effective these different strategies are, were that for speech-generating devices and PECs, it was 99% each, and other graphic symbols, it was 61%. So SGDs and PECs came out very strongly in this more recent research review. In 2009, Ralf Schlosser from Northeastern University said SGDs represent a viable and effective AAC option for individuals with ASD. He had also reviewed the research base and is one of the lead investigators in this arena. These days, we kind of tend to think that the empirical evidence speaks a clear message and that the effectiveness of SGDs should no longer be questioned. And this is it's an important point to keep in mind because you will often run into issues with insurance companies and service providers when trying to get funding for a speech-generating device. Lou Golinka and I, for that purpose, put together an ISAC session on how to go about funding for speech-generating devices. And in that session, we clearly said SGDs are one part of the standard of care to improve the functional communication and other outcomes for clients with ASD. These clients should not be denied access to these devices. It's clearly one of the many AAC strategies in the clinical toolbox when going into AAC intervention. So refer to these empirical research reviews, and you can also have our ISAC presentation when you are running into issues that a speech-generating device does not get funded and you feel strongly about it and you want to make the case. And
Lou Golinker, he's amazing. It's been around for a long time. What is happening, do you know, about iPads and Medi-Cal funding? Has that
There's,
effect on that?
so the most recent news is that Medicare, Medicaid is shifting towards a model of loaning devices instead of allowing you to purchase those.
Right.
Yeah. How that impacts...
Is that Medi-Cal, Medicaid for the adults, or is that for kids too?
Good question.
Is that the 13 months, is that applying to children?
I think it's for everyone, yeah. For everyone.
By April.
Yeah.
Sorry.
April 5th. All right. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion going on. If you go onto the listserv, the Azure Division 12, is it 12 or 16? Is it 12 listserv? There's a good amount of discussion going on. Well, Lukolenko has just published the most recent status of what's happening there on the policies for Medicare and Medicaid. So first of all, there's this shift towards loaning instead of allowing you to purchase those. And then what's happening with iPad apps and so forth, not clear what insurance is thinking. Lukolenko found a couple examples from... But those wasn't Medicare or Medicaid. This was more private insurance, where policies were written that every so and so many years, a client could get $100 of new apps, or $100 worth of apps in a given year. Yeah. So these funny types of policies are emerging to appear. But there is no unified standard, no unified policy or common agreement overall how different insurance providers would handle that. So at least something is going in that direction, that apparently one provider already thinks about giving so and so much away for an annual app purchase. But how this translates to the device, I don't know, because you would also have to purchase a tablet.
And the loaner makes sense in some ways because there's so much device abandonment, or God forbid if it's an adult client who is not going to be around or whatever. But I think, what do they do with the loaner equipment? And then do we have to write a report after that 13 months to validate that yes, in fact, it's the right device for the person? Do you know?
So after 13 months, we have to write another report.
But we do a cycle to kind of like reevaluate to see if is it continuing use and things like that. And I think,
Makes sense. I mean,
right. And then I think if the trial is longer, if somehow you're hospitalized or something that you cannot use the device for over 60 days, I believe, then you might extend the trial.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff happening at that end. Okay. Good. Moving on, how do we now make a transition? We've engaged in more low-tech strategies such as PACs, such as communication boards. How can we move on to speech-generating devices? That has been a research question we have recently pursued in my research lab. Earlier on, practitioners, parents were asking after successful mastery of these PACs phases. A lot of kids in our school district, PACs is often the initial AAC strategy to start out with. How can we then move on to an SGD? In a research review, while Schlosser and I did, we sought more innovations to that PACs protocol might be a good idea, and we continue investigating this using more rigorous methodologies. So in the project that I'm presenting here is we modified these traditional 6 PACs phases that I talked about earlier for implementation and transition to a speech-generating device. And we were then interested, when we are doing such a modified PACs protocol, what are the effects on teaching individuals to request, to improve their social communicative behaviors, and does this also have a facilitating effect on natural speech production? At this point of time, when we did that, we were interested in a particular device that was built for such purposes. That was really the first hardware attempt to mimic PACs and combine PACs with speech output, and I'll show that device in a little bit. We used an experimental design for this investigation, a multiple baseline design, where you have a baseline for each of the 3 children, and then there's a following treatment phase, and this treatment phase is split into these different PEX phases, then SGD phases, followed by an assessment of intervention maintenance. We had these 3 dependent variables. We looked at how well do these children increase in their ability to request. We taught them sessions consisting of 20 trials. We looked at improvements in social communicative behavior. We counted the number of responses that they made better eye contact, that they physically oriented themselves towards a communication partner. They got out of the autistic shell and sought more closeness with the trainer, the communication partner, and how many times did they actually engage in showing some positive emotion, some positive effect via smiling or laughter. Emerging speech, we counted how many word vocalizations were these children engaging in and how many word approximations would they be making. At that time, the novelty or innovation was that a father of a child with autism had created this Prox Talker device. You can see it resembles the traditional textbook quite a bit, but now instead of exchanging graphic symbols in exchange for a desired item, I can put those symbols on the sentence strip that actually speaks, and then this fairly simple device provides voice output. And instead of your textbook, you have these sheets here at the top, and you can construct more and more vocabulary pages and have your learner give your learner access to more vocabulary. Basically, all these little cards, they have a chip behind them, and you can program that through the device and record your own speech on every little picture card. And instead of exchanging, the individual then puts it down here on that sentence strip. We did 3 sessions per week in our departmental speech clinic. We did the first 2 phases with the regular textbook. Then we started replicating this on the Prox Talker device, and all the remaining stages, we didn't go into phase 6, we went up to phase 5. We did those on the device. And here's this little boy again that you saw earlier in the autism diagnostic evaluation. This is his behavior during baseline. You will see that he has not mastered the device, neither has he mastered the regular PEX approach. He will grab and reach for items that are inside, as he did earlier this morning in the diagnostic session. Okay, so we could see lots of pre-linguistic behaviors, speech limited mostly to vocalizations, these squealing sounds. If he doesn't get immediately what he's asking for, he might throw a little fit and so forth. This is his progress during the first PEX phase. The prompter standing behind him here is fading out. She is engaging in this little picture exchange approach. And you remember from earlier this morning that he had occasionally he had a little few attempts to make a word approximation, and this got significantly better once we moved into intervention. And she's doing one thing correctly, which is when they are doing this exchange, picture exchange, she provides the verbal model along with the desired item and gives him a chance to imitate it. And he got one aspect wrong. He said gummy bear, and it was a fruit snack or something, but then he even corrected himself next time, made a strong word approximation towards fruit snack. This is phase 2 of PEC's intervention. Now he's supposed to pick up that PEC's book, use it across the room with different communication partners. Okay, so after these 2 phases, we faded in that prox talker. This is the first session on the prox talker, and you will see he is initially trying to pick up the symbol card here and exchange it for his desired item. Then she goes in and prompts him to make the correct response, which is picking up the picture card here and then putting it on the sentence strip there to have the speech output. And from there on, he gets it right every single time.
Fruit snack. There we go. More fruit snacks. Fruit snack. Fruit snack. There we go. Marshmallow, yummy.
All right, this goes on and on. I'm now fast forwarding to the end of phase 5. He learned to combine an I want symbol. He learned to discriminate between different symbols on the prox talker. We then taught him to do an I want symbol first plus desired item. And now he's at that phase, at one of those later phases, where she is asking, what do you want? And he's supposed to do his own little sentence on the device. So you asked me earlier, what is my thoughts about scripted speech? This is clearly somewhat scripted and procedural, but depending on, given where he came from, that he had next to no functional, meaningful words when we started intervention, I consider that a good, strong progress. At least we're getting him to this level he can meaningfully use the device, and we have also seen some good progress in saying the actual words that correspond with the graphic symbols. All right. Then 2010, 2011, the iPad came out. Parents were asking, well, this is still a somewhat expensive device. I'm not even sure if insurance was covering it. Is there any way we can move on from this to an iPad? And in those early days, there weren't a whole lot of apps available, and not many that we liked for these types of learners that were just making their first steps with speech-generating devices. So we decided to program our own, and at that point in time, it was called IPAC, Interactive Purdue AAC app or something like that. And here are the first steps of that individual on our iPad app prototype.
I mix it up.
I want large. Twizzler, large. Twizzler.
Twizzler. There's large Twizzler. Got cookies and Pop-Tarts. Ooh, yummy things. Put them back.
Twizzler.
Yeah, from his.
I want large.
Good. You can't touch it, I think.
Twizzler.
Okay.
What?
I want large Twizzler.
Twizzler is, of course, a difficult word to say for a young child with autism.
I want large fruit snack.
What now? I can't really hear you. I want large, large fruit. Okay, fruit snack. Say it louder. I want yes, that's great. Large fruit snack. Put it back when you're done eating. No. But why don't you put the symbol back?
All right. So she did a fantastic job keeping him in this zone of proximity where she was just pushing him a little bit to reach his maximum capacity and really working hard on saying those sentences, reading aloud that sentence with him to further encourage and facilitate his natural speech production. We learned very early on that kids will push all types of buttons when you just put an iPad in front of them. So you could see in this prototype, we tried to cover up the home button just with duct tape and with paper towel and stuff like that. And nowadays you can do this easily within the accessibility functions. You can block that, and you have access guide and so forth. What else was I going to say? We also learned that it is important. You could see that on the screen they were always, let me scramble them up and let me confuse you, so to say. It turned out that it is important to kind of reshuffle, randomize the symbols. That has the advantage that the kid always has to truly look at the symbols, and we're not teaching some automated motor sequence that they would always go from the first one from the left to the second one on the right, and then one row down and so forth. So we built a randomization feature in it, and we kept the interface as simple as possible to allow an easy transition from these strategies that these learners have been exposed to previously, that they can kind of see the similarity to a textbook that's where the symbols are displayed on top, and then there's the sentence strip down there, and the same thing is true for the Proxtalker device. So everything, textbook, Proxtalker, app, is kind of one trajectory, one way to go down, and it all resembles one another. So these are the results for that study. This is the individual that we've seen in the video clips. We can see an initial low baseline when it comes to requesting skills, and he's quickly picking up the PECS procedures and learns to request with PECS. There's a very easy transition. This is PECS stage 2, and this is Proxtalker phase 1. This is the session that you have observed. he can replicate that PEX skill that he has learned here easily with the prox talker, making just this one mistake in the beginning, and then it makes click for him and he produces correct responses. When using the prox talker, we made the interesting observation when it came down to going across the room. Initially the prox talker was a little bit more heavier than such a PEX book, so with the new phase here, performance drops down in the beginning, but then he catches up. He has no problems learning to discriminate symbols here during phase 3, constructing little I want sentences. Not a problem either on the prox talker. Kept that performance level when we went into I want plus response, and then we started teaching him attributes like small versus big, like different colors, a few versus a many. That resulted in an initial mixed responses, but he then kind of got up to this mastery level again, and those skills were maintained. And then there's an easy generalization to the iPad. He maintains those skills even when we presented him with the iPad, with that first prototype of our app, and he maintains those skills 6 to 8 weeks after intervention was over. We replicated those effects, of course, to other individuals, but not everyone was as successful as this very first individual. And this goes back to my earlier points this morning. There's a lot of variability in these individuals. Also, everyone was classified as severely autistic. Was about the same age. They were all all around 10 years old at that point. We cannot rule out that some had more degrees of intellectual disabilities than others, or had morphosensory problems than others. It's just very difficult to test them on these more specific details if they are nonverbal and minimally speaking. The second individual also made an easy transition to the prox talker. Took a little bit longer to understand which one is this, to how to do I want sentences, and got into this mode of answering more or less spontaneously to what do you want. But we didn't have, this was then at the end of the school year, we didn't have a chance to try out the iPad app with either this one or with that one. But he became a communicator with the prox talker, used that very effectively for his requesting purposes, and also maintained those skills after the study was concluded. And the third individual had more of an issue making that transition, had more of an issue acquiring these PEX phases first, and then even a little bit more of an issue transitioning to the prox talker device. Was not successful in picking up that prox talker device, carrying it over to the room, and using this successfully with different communication partners. For him, it was too bulky, too heavy, didn't like how this would be carried. There's like a strap, a shoulder strap that goes around here. It was just not the most portable solution for him. So we just went back into prox talker phase 1 on one-on-one on the table, doing one symbol requests, and he was successful in maintaining this little bit of a requesting skill. When it came to social communicative behaviors, to cut it short, across all 3 of these individuals, we've seen increases in their social communicative repertoires. In some more than in, he already had not too bad of social responses to start out with. So varying degrees of success here, and again our most impaired individual had made a little bit of progress, but wasn't able to maintain that after the intervention was over. He was getting sort of falling back into his autistic shell. This did not stick with him so well. In terms of speech production, we saw the best intervention results for that individual in the video clips. The second individual got to the point that he would be making vocalizations of the first sound of the target words, and that was settling in by the end of those PEX phases 4 and 5, when we made more attempts to, let's read the sentence strip together. Can you say it? And I want, and then give a little bit of a pause time and prompt for the first sound or the actual word approximation for his desired item. And the third individual, again, we didn't see him speak through any of the phases, whether it was through PECs or it was through the POC stalker. That's, however, a typical result in treatment research in autism. This is just a very heterogeneous population. And when you then go into more advanced techniques,
damage than these two, and this one has a specific pattern that allows him to go to a certain level of linguistic competency, but not much far beyond the spelling, speaking, sounds, and vocalizations. Right. So that led us to design our own app, and this app is called SpeakAll, and it was originally developed by Purdue engineering students.
I just have a couple questions. The first, so to get the Proc Stalker and also to get an iPad with an app on it is very prohibitive for like a school district to fund. What are your thoughts on going straight from PECs to an iPad app such as SpeakAll?
I'll be talking to it right after this one.
And then the second
That
question...
was exactly the question that we asked for our follow-up research project, because people had said exactly the same thing.
Okay. And then the second question is, if you're going from SpeakAll, which has a randomization feature of the icons, to go to a more sophisticated app with fixed positioning of buttons, what is the generalization like? Because
we recommend in SpeakAll, I can show you this in a little bit, you turn off the randomization after a while. So as your symbol repertoire increases, and if you have, basically you only need the randomization till you have taught symbol discrimination.
right.
Once they can distinguish different symbols from one another, then you grow in symbol vocabulary. The randomization becomes a little bit counterproductive, because then the time increases that they need for retrieval. And as you grow your symbol vocabulary, you want retrieval to go as fast as possible. So we then have a feature in SpeakAll that you can turn this off, and you can put on more activity sheets that they can select at the top row. So that the randomization is no longer there. If they want to retrieve further symbols, they just tap above here and go from one set of vocabulary to another. Like I said, Purdue students originally composed that. It got downloaded when we put it out in 2011, 2012. Within a year, it got downloaded over 10,000 times without much promotion, marketing, just by word of mouth. And then Purdue decided.
On the free version. If you then need further, you want to go beyond teaching 20 symbols and you need more symbols, the advanced version for $24.99 gives you those capabilities. And then for classrooms and institutions that want to manage several learners on one device, there is a Premium Plus version for $39.99. All right. We had a few principles in mind that we wanted to go into app design. First of all, we wanted to make sure that this is really based on rigorous scientific research. All of the studies, all of the claims here is not pseudoscientific. There is good amount of data behind it, and this data has also influenced how we designed the app, how we refined it, how we constructed that interface. We have behavioral data as well as neurological, neuroimaging data to show intervention with SpeakAll can actually produce an effect. Right? We wanted this to be for early language learners, for folks particularly on the autism spectrum who are making this transition from being a prelinguistic to an early symbolic communicator, and it allows for a very easy transition, like I mentioned before, for those that are coming from a textbook now wanting to make that shift onto a speech-generating or tablet device. We hope that it is autism friendly in a way that it reduces cognitive overload and reduces overly sensory input. You can compose, you can construct speak all so that this very, very distinct, the learner can clearly say, this is my symbol that I need to activate, this is the selection area, and there's the speaking area, the sentence strip that speaks it out. You can reduce the amounts of buttons here so that they have no way to get out of the app and they'll stay within. A lot of apps that were out there at the time were very busy places, didn't have very iconic representations of graphic symbols on them, and were often resulting in too much cognitive and sensory overload when we tried those with our kids. We thought there might be a need for a very simple light app that's composed according to these sensory processing characteristics in autism learners. Like I mentioned before, many of them have this issue of filtering out salient and truly important stimuli from a stimulus-rich environment. And for the beginning communicator with autism, graphic symbols should be carefully chosen. We know that these individuals are very strong with visual learning, but the symbols that need to go on their devices and on their communication boards need to be strong representations of what they stand for. If those symbols are too abstract, the chances you make in learning more difficult for them. A hierarchical organization of graphic symbol vocabulary, as you can find this on other apps, also has a chance of increasing cognitive load. And here's an example of someone who started with a very fancy app and had issues in retrieving those symbols.
Can you use your iPad?
I want to play, to listen to music, something to eat, drink, a drink of 7-Up, Cocoa.
Levi, do this.
Levi. Food, meal, more back.
Look, can you push this?
Snacks, chocolate roll.
So this is typical for many apps and interfaces out there. You have to go to one overarching category first, foods, then you go to snacks, and under snacks, finally you go to your preferred cookie. And this is exactly what we were trying to avoid, and not have this categorical, this hierarchy of an interface. We wanted something that displays symbols more readily available, more for immediate access with Speak All. The platform is so intuitive and so easy to use. It can incorporate all types of graphic symbols or photographs that you take with the iPad, and it can be used with children as well as with adolescents and adults. And we have been able to demonstrate that parents can be involved in intervention, and this is so easy to use that parents can be trained, at least in the beginning stages. Later on, they should get a good amount of supervision, but in the beginning stages, parents can be the interventionist and get some initial communication going with Speak All. So then a small startup company grew out of this that is currently located in Purdue Research Park. Purdue provided me help in form of other folks that really know how to run the business. I'm just a science guy on the team. I stay away from all the business decisions and marketing decisions. I just try to create the research behind it and find participants and come up with better science to improve the interface, and hope that the scientific results guide design decisions and so forth. So all of these are currently at Purdue, except for our technology advisor, our programming guru, who is a technology expert on apps, who is working out of Colorado. In addition to Speak All, by the end of this month, we will be releasing an add-on that is called Speak Together that allows cloud-based data management with Speak All. So if you're using Speak All in your classroom and you also want to know on another device what's currently being done, you can sync those devices more easily. The parents can continue on their iPad what the school teacher has done in school and vice versa. Data can be changed. however, with the proper agreements and confidentiality measures in place. So those are coming next, Speak Together and Speak Cloud, where you can share content across devices, and you can also download more symbols into your app. Speak One is something that I already mentioned that is out there as a prototype and an early simple app that you can use to test cause and effect, tablet candidacy, kind of try out how big should the symbols be, what is an ideal size for someone who is just starting with iPad intervention. And then Speak More, something that's currently under development, that is a follow-up app to Speak All for those that have mastered Speak All, and we have to work on increasing vocabulary, increasing complexity of utterances, and teaching them generalization. That is the purpose that Speak More does, more of an app for language training and language generalization. Not available on iTunes yet, but later this year. I'm going to skip over the Speak All hands-on. I want to really get to your question and talk about, can we directly start and not having to go through PECs, not having to go through another speech-generating device. What happens if we were trying immediately with an iPad-based intervention? You have on your handout, you have our website, you have our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has a lot of intervention ideas, and all the different steps that I showed in the videos, those are put out there as intervention videos for instruction. And if you want to do me a huge favor, please go to our Facebook site and like us. That would be really, really nice. We have about 200 likes so far, and it helps tremendously getting the word out if people like us on our Facebook site. I brought some brochures for those that are interested. I'm not sure I have enough for everybody, but please feel free to grab a brochure and take this home with you. But I want to really answer that question, because this is exactly what came back from practitioners. And in this experiment, we had the same setup, the same research design, but now we started immediately with the iPad, and the iPad with the Speak All app replaces the Prox Talker. And I'm not necessarily saying this is limited to the Speak All app. Nowadays there's tons of apps out there. You might find another app that you are interested in where you could probably also reproduce that effect. I believe things go very smoothly with the Speak All app. It's especially been designed to do this type of initial communicative repertoire. Of course, I'm a big fan of it, but please don't think that I'm biased. I'm happy if people try this with other applications as well. In that experiment, we kept our requesting measure and we kept our emerging speech measure. We decided not to keep the social communicative portion because we did this in applied settings. And in applied settings, it is very difficult to control and count how many times do they establish eye contact, how many times do they show laughter or smiling or emotional responses, because there's so much going on in the classroom, so much going on in the home environment that you just can't keep track of everything. All right, in this experiment we had 4 participants from 10 to 12 years, all diagnosed as severely autistic, all having limited or no functional speech to start out with. And here's that young boy again that you may remember from the early morning session when we talked about diagnosis. This is now the baseline of before we do Speak All intervention, before we do treatment with the iPad. He hasn't mastered the PECs, he hasn't mastered iPad either, and we're not going to teach him PECs. We just wanted to put it out there to make sure it's not in his already established repertoire. Lots of repetitive speech, a lot of echolalic speech in him.
What does that mean?
There's the echolalia.
See, you want the toothpaste.
The typical autism symptoms, the jumping, the hand flapping.
What I have. Okay, you want the pretzel.
All right? And this is now, we started directly with an iPad, followed those PEC stages, so same protocol, and this is now in the middle of those interventions, of that intervention. He is learning to do a little I want plus desired item sentence on his iPad.
Toothpaste.
Yum, yum, yum. Can you say it, David?
I want toothpaste.
Excellent.
So you could see I was trying to stay away from prompting and only at the very last moment kind of pointed towards the symbols to give him this hint, this prompt. So now use your own voice, your natural speech, and let's read that little sentence together. By the way, it's not uncommon in very autistic learners that we see him requesting food, toothpaste.
I want toothpaste.
Say it one more time for me.
I want toothpaste.
The toothpaste provides a certain stimulus in the oral cavity that he doesn't get elsewhere. So toothpaste is more interesting.
You say it. Good job. Yes, you are.
In the end, it's a sensory issue. He's looking for a lot of sensory stimulation in his oral cavity. Okay? And then by the very end, we've talked about this before, and you folks have asked about that. What is the relationship between natural speech emergence, natural speech production, and then AAC, and continuing or discontinuing AAC? Here we were able to show, actually you should see this first. Just ask yourself, where's the iPad?
How do you ask?
Oh, your big candy cane.
You want your big candy cane? There's your big candy cane.
Big candy cane.
Can you say it in your big voice? You want big candy cane? Nice job.
Big candy cane.
You want big candy cane? Nice job. Big one.
Big candy cane.
Can you say it one more time?
Candy cane.
You want big candy cane? There's your big candy cane.
So we were actually able to show that we can fade out the iPad if natural speech has progressed to this level, that he can independently make those vocalizations or speech productions. The requesting stayed at the same level. He still got 20 out of 20 right, no matter if he was using the iPad or if he was producing this with his own natural speech. Now, it is, of course, still very scripted, and we don't necessarily know for sure, does he fully understand each portion of that sentence? Does he understand what I want means? Does he understand what big means? Well, big we can test, because we can give him different items to choose from, and if he goes for the larger one or the smaller amount and so forth, we can test his understanding that he truly understands a few versus a many, a big versus little. Okay? But does he truly understand I want? We don't know that yet. But we are happy that we got him to this level, that his echolalic and jargon squealing type of speech improved and was able to be able to shape into more natural, more meaningful utterances. And this is now a candidate where I would say maybe continue to use the iPad for visual enhancement and visual guidance and motivational aspect, maybe even as a reinforcer to teach new concepts, but put most of the emphasis in speech and language therapy on spontaneous production, generalization, moving beyond requesting, moving into labeling, commenting, always enforcing the use of his natural speech production. So you can see how the nature of intervention changes. And I feel that this is fairly common or not so uncommon in autistic learners. You start out with your full amount, your set of AAC, your AAC clinical toolbox, and then as you go through that clinical toolbox and you see improvements, you kind of start fading those out. And with some of the kids we get to the level that natural speech production takes over and becomes the primary medium, and EAC kind of fades back a little bit. All right? So it is not, how do I say this? You can be unconventional these days. You don't have to limit yourself to just thinking, okay, now I have to do AAC all the time, or I have to just work on natural speech production all the time. The both of them go hand in hand. We find that this is more and more true for these types of learners that we are seeing. Over there?
I'm just wondering, you just mentioned other linguistic communicative functions like commenting, and most of the videos we've seen using the app have been primarily
requesting, yes.
So I'm wondering if you have evidence of how much these children, students have generalized to other functions while using this.
I've always used it with pre-linguistic learners in the context of teaching them to request. I have not had a chance of going beyond requesting and following up, which is mostly a limitation of, my grant ends by the end of the school year, and then I no longer have access to these individuals. A colleague of mine is doing social skills, sometimes even following up with individuals that came out of my lab as fairly successful, and is using SpeakAll for social skills training. But that person hasn't taken any data on it. I'd love to get the hand on it and kind of put the data behind it, because that would be huge, would be a good demonstration that someone can use the app beyond those initial training purposes and then move on and do something more than just requesting with it. Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but how long did that take? How many months or?
This was 1 semester. The testing done in the diagnostic stuff that you saw with this young boy was done in the fall. The initial iPad intervention started in January, and he's already wearing a shirt, so it must be May or summer. So it got really fairly quick with him.
Just curious, was the child removing something from his mouth and putting it on the ground?
Yeah. And this time he is going after, he's going after the candy canes. And he always has this preference for minty flavors, things that are very, very strong on his tongue in the oral cavity. And all he's doing is he just wants to lick on them just to get that sensory input, and then he's spitting them out. He never eats the complete item. Yeah, it's another peculiarity about autistic learners, that sometimes they have these restricted food preferences that are linked to sensory processes, sensory responses.
I have a couple of questions. Is there a reason why you put the messaging on the bottom? Is that more for access? Or?
Well, first of all, the sentence strip is on the bottom so that it resembles these other strategies that are out there. The second reason is, and this is just clinical experience or clinical opinion, we found it advantageous if they go from above, from the top to the bottom. And there's if you know the practical AAC blog, Carol Zangari that's running it, when we first released that, we had a little bit of a discussion on with folks that asked us about what are the advantages of having drag and drop versus direct touch. We also have a direct touch feature, which is the traditional way of activating it. You just press the button, you just press the symbol, and then it automatically flows towards the speaking portion, or it automatically speaks it out as soon as you touch it. Now, for some of our kids, we find it advantageous if they do the drag and drop. It forces them to compose, to stay longer with the symbol, and to compose, to put more effort into composing that sentence. They don't turn so easily away. And the attention that is required for the drag and drop is just a little bit more than for the one-touch symbol activation.
So the only reason why I'm concerned is because Allison's question about sort of like generalizing beyond the requesting. So since I work in the schools, pre-K through high school, what I would do after this kid has now mastered requesting is use at AEC as a visual augmentative language where to sort of start saying, I see candy,
Exactly.
or I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
candy, or whatever. But a lot of AEC apps have a message window on the top. I'm wondering if that would create a discrepancy for the child in terms of...
It's a good design idea. I don't have so much resources to do all types of versions that like I'd wanted to, but it might be a good idea for another feature if people have gotten to this stage and now they want to see this on the top. And if it's on the top, then maybe the communication partner can also easier see what that person is trying to communicate. So that can be another. In a future version, we could give you guys the ability to switch the location of that sentence strip from the bottom to the top. I mean, this is pretty flexible.
This is a real issue, if the kid has mastered this app and we want to switch them to another app, which happens all the time.
Oh yeah, no, this is fine. And we were composing this as a stepping stone. If the kid is growing, it's perfectly fine. We don't say they should always stick with Speak All. It's perfect if they can then move on to more sophisticated apps that have an on-screen keyboard to teach literacy, for example, or they have advanced features that we can provide with our relatively simple app.
I was just wondering, how many pages of vocabulary can you put into this?
I think pretty much theoretically unlimited, but at a certain point you would be running out of memory.
Okay, so you can can you scroll to different pages?
Yeah, I'll put it on in a little bit just to kind of give a little demo. But let me finish some more of the results here. You've seen this one, so we don't need to. This is that boy that had the behavioral issues after. A few months, probably couple months of Speak All intervention.
Oh, what else is on that table? Waste box.
Can you say it? I want Slinky. Very good. Slinky.
Well, you're playing this time. We're really enjoying all of these things. Wow. Wow.
Really fun. You say it. I want Slinky. Can you say it? Slinky. Very good.
What do you want? Nice. Take them.
Evan wants to try.
Evan's turn.
Evan's turn, yeah. Exactly. Wow. Look what Evan can do. Got a different twirl.
Oh, look at that. What do you want?
You tell me.
I want. Nice.
Here you go.
You do it like Evan did?
All right, so I wanted to present another example of someone who is really more severely involved and does not have this grandiose outcome that he actually started to speak in his own words and with his own voice. But we are also happy with those little steps that guy made. You've seen him earlier this morning, how severe his problem behavior was. Now he looks much more relaxed, he's much more calmed down. We try to provide as little prompting as possible. You see how this is difficult, how he still needs a little bit of a hint here and there, a little bit of a cue. But we were happy that he started to make those initial vocalizations, attempts to say the starting sound of that word. With Slinky, of course, that was a little bit difficult. With Ball, you could see the B coming out, and this little bit of speech elicitation there. So you have different types of cases, different types of scenarios that you end up when working in this space of really severe autism. We replicated those results across the clinic, across the school and the home environment. This is that boy that we saw in the very beginning, where we were able to fade the iPad completely out and just work on speech for requesting, and the intervention effect stayed on across the different settings after 6 to 8 weeks after intervention concluded. These are his speech results. Basically, the speech results are telling us the intentional, the meaningful speech utterances go up, and the echolalic aberrant speech utterances, they go to this. They don't completely disappear. And you've seen even in the boy, he still had a lot of hand flapping, a lot of autistic symptoms that he retained throughout intervention. Also, his speech got better. So it's not like you're changing everything in a very short amount of time, but you can make at least some impact. And this individual, this was the one I just showed you. He couldn't get to that stage that he would be able to do attributes such as small and big, a few versus a many, but was able to do I want plus desired item on his iPad and also maintained those skills. Same picture for this individual. No, that was speech, I'm sorry. This individual had struggled with the iPad fade out, got to the point of producing sentences that contained attributes, but it was not we weren't successful in taking the iPad away. He needed the iPad to kind of making his requests, the speech for him developed to a point that he could also say those little sentences, but only if the iPad was present, not without the iPad. He got into this routine with him. We had to read it on the iPad. And another individual was not as successful. This is phase 3, 4, 5. Actually, I think we went back from phase 3 to phase 1 because phase 3 was already tricky, and he didn't get to mastery of different symbols on the iPad when using this Speak All. So he got to phase 2 successfully and maintained skills that were taught during phase 2. And so again, the same story. You have most of the participants that make considerable gains, and then you have one in there in such a sample where the gains are more minimal, smaller, but still they are there, and they are in improvement over baseline. And this is speech. So in this project, our findings support the notion that AAC can have a facilitative effect on natural speech development. It definitely refutes the myth that AAC would prevent speech. There might actually be a particular role for using AAC to shape such echolalic utterances and aberrant speech utterances as we have seen in this little boy. And this confirms the theory in the field that expressive and receptive communication can be enhanced through augmented input. We have the speech model, we have the visual symbols, and the clinician also provides a model to help the child imitate and produce their own natural speech. The PECS principles, these behavioral procedures to teach someone how to exchange a symbol or activate that symbol, and then discriminate between different symbols and compose little I want sentences. Those seem to hold true regardless of what the modality is, whether I'm using my PECS book or if I'm going straight away and I'm replacing that PECS book with an iPad and this readable app. All of them mastered iPad intervention, but the degree of how far they gotten into the mastery of the PECS protocol, that was variable. And the gains in speech production were most notable for that child that already had some, also it was echolalic and aberrant autistic speech, but that was the strongest candidate, and it might be, this is a predictor for this outcome of better speech production. We would hypothesize that based on these results, pre-treatment speech skills and degrees of cognitive impairment might be predictors of how far someone can get in such a protocol. All right. Someone had asked earlier what causes autism, and I mentioned that when you look at neuroimaging results, you can see how the brain is miswired in autism. This is an EEG, a quantitative electroencephalogram of a typically developing individual, of an age-matched child, non-autistic. And what these brain maps show is everything that's green is normal electrical activity. Nothing is wrong in the brain. And these brain scans are repeated across different areas of cognitive functioning. There's arousal, attention, executive functioning, measures for linguistic and other general cognitive domains. And if you compare these brain maps to one of those participants that is in the study, then you can see how the autistic brain is so much different in discharging unusual amounts of electrical activity. All of the red areas indicate an over amount of electrical activity. There is so much miswiring between brain regions that the synapses, the neural fibers that are connecting the different brain regions with one another, it's like a fireworks is going on in there. And then on the other side, there are some areas of the autistic brain that are not well connected with one another, and there is not enough electrical activity flowing through those, and those show up as these blue, under-connected, under-engaged, under-activated areas. And this is typical profile for an autistic brain. Compare that to your control individual. You see the difference. And this is what causes the autistic symptoms. That's what causes the autistic behaviors. That's what causes the aberrant speech, echolalia, hand flapping, repetitive behaviors, and so forth. And this was then, this participant went into intervention on 6/18. We measured him again on 12/9 after such a study where we, 3 days a week, across the home, across the school, and the clinic, intensively intervention. And you could see how much of this electrical overcharge, surcharge has been improved even in less than half a year. All right? Now, we used Speak All to do that, but I'm not saying this is what Speak All created this. But the intervention in general doesn't matter. Maybe it does matter a little bit, but just AAC in general, intensively in a behavioral paradigm, can produce such results even on a neurophysiological level. All right, last study, I want to just show the highlights before we still have some time. So we're going to do parent training, then demo of the app, and then you're good to go. Okay? All right. And you get your certificates. All right. Parent training, let's jump straight. We're doing the same thing, now replacing interventionists with parents. Parents learning how to use a tablet device with the Speak All app and becoming clinicians that are starting an AAC interventions with their kid with severe autism. Again, we use Speak All. You can probably use another app to do the same thing. In that parent training program, the parents receive comprehensive training, including a general workshop at the parent support group, then written instructions in the form of little cheat sheets that would walk them through, step by step, through each intervention phase. We were sitting down with the parents and we were engaging in modeling and role-playing. And we have a checklist where we are checking off how many of the steps do they get correct. And once they have 100% correct, then we are letting them work one-on-one with their child. We also have video resources on the YouTube channel where they can review the entire procedure if they are not sure, if they after an intervention session want a little bit further input. But we also sit down with them and provide feedback if we look at the videotapes and we find that, okay, they have done this and this wrong, they should be doing things slightly differently. Two clinicians with advanced specs training independently checked these sessions for treatment integrity. Treatment schedule was about 2 days a week, and oftentimes it's 1 or 2 sessions. If the child could stand another session, we would do a little break, give a play break in between and then start another one. Those are our step-by-step instructions, our cheat sheets, and these are the intervention videos that parents can always turn to on the YouTube channel. This is a typical training session. There's one of our graduate students pretending to be the child, and then the parents are the trainers. We have these treatment integrity checklists. We check them off on each step. Have they done it correctly? Once they get 100%, they get to work with their child. In this study, first participant is close to being done. These two are still in the intervention. Again, we have all of them classified as having severe autism. One little guy has Down syndrome in addition to a diagnosis of moderate to severe autism. So it's a dual diagnosis. Again, most of them have no vocalizations, no functional speech, or very minimal speech, less than 15 functional words. All right. Here's that first participant, and someone asked me this morning, what do I think about having girls being diagnosed with autism? That was one of the rare cases where we actually had a participant that was a female, but as you can see in the videos, she'd actually had very strong intervention success. So this is at baseline. And like in most of these participants, her initial behaviors are reaching, grabbing for items, a little bit unusual, repetitive, almost tendering behaviors there. Okay, now this is Dad doing those one symbol requests in phase 1. She still needs some prompting to learn to do a Speak All app.
Checks.
Yeah, excellent.
Checks.
It was fantastic. It seemed like she got this pretty much straight away that she should say those words, and I'm struggling to understand why no one in school tried that earlier with her. Why it took 6-7 years till she actually starts word production. Maybe because of that developmental trajectory, that autism was so severe in early years, and now she just hit the developmental milestone that she's ready to work on speech production. I don't know, but.
Nice job.
Okay. Then moving on to phase 3, she's learning to discriminate between different symbols.
Fritos.
And those symbols have to match with whatever she's picking now from the tray.
Sensory toy.
This is a generalization probe. She was not taught those sensory toys before, and we were just trying to see, okay, she masters the food items, obviously. Does this generalize over to the sensory toys? The speech production, for some reason, was not quite as strong in these early generalization probes. All right, more PACS phases, advanced teaching here of a little sentence structure, I want plus desired item.
want raisins. I want raisins. I want raisins. Raisins. I want sensory toy. I want sensory toy.
So, but then this is the second generalization probe, and then the speech was also there for those items.
What do you want? I want cats. Checks. What do people down here want? I'll have some cakes. Delicious. I want kicks. I want kicks. Say it one more time. I want kicks. Kicks.
Good update. I'm so scared to have something in it. Yeah, this good good thing. Bridget, what do you want?
I want minute maids. I want minute maids. Say it again. I want minute maids.
So again, those were my modest attempts to try to fade out as much prompts as possible and to increase a little bit more spontaneous communication there. And actually, this is already far beyond needing that iPad. If I hadn't been in a research study, I would have already faded out that iPad, right? And more used it for motivational purposes or so forth. But because we have to follow a research protocol and every individual has to stick with the iPad through all the 5 different phases for experimental control, I couldn't do that at that time, and we had to follow the same procedures. So you will see that later on, she gets a little bit overproductive with saying these sentences many more times than it will actually be necessary. Then when we had completed all the phases, and I was actually at a point that I could take the iPad away from her, then we of course did that.
I want Pringles.
I want Pringles. I want Pringles.
Right. Pringles outside. Can I have that iPad? I better see that, buddy.
I want fruit roll-up. I want fruit roll-up. I want fruit roll-up.
And she's perfectly fine doing this without the iPad, but now we've actually over-taught saying this because she got it so many times. She got it on the iPad, she got it with her mom and dad.
I want Tostitos.
I want Tostitos. I want Tostitos. Tostitos.
Yeah. So in the future, if I would dare to do it again, and I have someone who gets up to speed so quickly, I would kind of tell the parents not to over-teach and over-engage in, because then we are creating these more scripted utterances and these routines that might then be difficult to get out of, and instead we need to expand on them, not always repeat them over and over again. Right?
I want Pringles.
Pringles.
Okay, and here is 6 or 8 weeks after we've stopped that. We're doing another generalization probe, requesting, but without the iPad. And this is her sister. Her twin sister is present there. Her twin sister has no autism at all. Her twin sister is completely normal. And now we're trying to get her to request for her favorite toys again. Talk about I've taught her too much, you know. You know, it's like she can't stop. It's like a little champ. We've turned on the switch, and now she's just saying this too many times.
You put it on your face. That was funny.
I want the light bulb. I want purple sensory toy. I want sensory toy.
Here, Emmy, can we take one side of the something?
I want purple sensory toy. I want purple sensory.
Sit up, silly. Sit up.
I'm going to put sensory toys on my hand.
You are.
I want purple sensory toy. I want purple sensory toy. I want purple
So again, there's my earlier point. We should have made that switch from the traditional, the AAC head should have disappeared, and the more regular speech language therapy should have come a little bit on earlier. But like I said, when you are stuck in a research study, you gotta finish those protocol phases exactly as it's supposed to be, and then kind of struggle with that. But we'll fix it. I'm pretty sure from now on we can still work on her. So.
What was the specific function of having the repetition? Right
So-
after,
We wrote that in the protocol and added a little bit on to the traditional PECS procedures, because we were finding in these earlier studies that we have to really work hard. Kids didn't get to make those speech productions until we really solicited speech really thoroughly. And so we had them not just say it once, but give them an extra opportunity to also say it one more time. And this is when we saw that, you may have remembered those patterns, it was kind of flat in the beginning, and then towards the end they had those stronger acquisition rates. And this was because we did this really heavy speech elicitation. But for someone like this, who gets up to speed so quickly, this is then quickly becoming counterproductive. And you should have done less of that and faded out AAC a little bit earlier and kind of go on with a variety of other things that go beyond requesting and expand the vocabulary and don't get into these scripted speech modes. So this is where this is this first individual, the female that we saw. You can see very strong acquisition rates, also very strong generalization over to the toys, and perfectly fine to do this without the iPad then. The kids that are currently completing the protocol take a little bit longer to go towards mastery, and do I have the speech production data on there? She was very strong in speech production. The other kids, this one has not said any word yet. This is the fellow with the dual diagnosis, and this fellow, the third one, is just about to start making word approximations. I don't have the data from the last months. It would be getting up even higher. It started here in that session and keeps improving. So also parents did a good job, at least those that we have seen so far, in correctly implementing those steps. They have strong scores of treatment integrity, correct implementation of the protocol steps by the parents. But like we are seeing more families, and we might find that for some this is not as easy to implement than it is for others. Here is that fellow with the dual diagnosis.
What she's got?
All right, and here's the third participant currently in that study. Before intervention, baseline.
You're doing a great job. Oh my. You have a terrible cough. Stevie, look.
This is he's learning phase 1.
Capri Sun.
Capri Sun.
All right, needs a lot of prompting in the beginning to
Capri Sun.
get to mastery.
Look, yummy.
Tapioca pudding.
Tapioca pudding.
Tapioca pudding.
Put it back, did we? Tapioca pudding. Mama's should have been looking. Stevie, look, yummy.
Tapioca pudding.
Pudding.
Tapioca pudding.
Pudding.
All right. So in these we are still following through with these through the remaining phases and trying to get to more advanced sentence constructions, and then see how far we get, if they can also beef up in their speech production. But you can, again, the point is you see how different participants are. They all have the same autism diagnosis, yet you see totally different outcomes or totally different rates of acquisition and success. Sometimes families can't do it. I don't think we have a lot of time left. This was a family where the kids started throwing the iPad around, and then we had to abandon it. Got to the point that he would be throwing this in the shelf or so forth. And, so then he went back to the autism treatment center, and they put the major focus of therapy getting his behavior problems or his aberrant behaviors under control. So these type of things happen as well, and then this is not a good candidate for a family-based, family-implemented type of intervention, because the parents would be overwhelmed. They don't know how to get something like this under control if someone starts throwing the iPad. All right. So these findings provide support that AAC again can have an facilitative effect on natural speech development. We have again some more evidence AAC doesn't prevent speech, and these previous findings have been replicated. Limitations of such a study. We've seen a lot of success in working with parents, but we had to at some points in time, we had to send a lot of people over to the parent home. That is not necessarily a cost-efficient approach, if that were to be done in reality, in practice. We might in future studies want to investigate how much support, what is the minimum amount of support that's needed for a parent to be effective and engage in parent-implemented AAC. Of course, we are working in a very limited geographical context. The families that are working with us are mostly Purdue employees, often professors, and of course they are very easy to work with. They have a strong understanding of intervention, of AAC and so forth. In a different area, with a different population, this might not look exactly the same. For some families, such an approach can create a burden on the family schedule. Like I mentioned before, the ability to handle problem behavior if something like this occurs can be an obstacle. Finding trained personnel to work with could also be another difficulty. You have to have some supervision by someone who's willing to engage in such a parent approach with you. Nevertheless, we find that these results underscore the potential of working with parents for maximizing the benefits of AAC intervention, and clinicians hopefully will recognize these values of joint parent-professional partnerships and be willing to further go down this venue of pursuing parent training and making this an option. All right. Let's have the parent have the last word.
One of the hardest things about having a child with autism is that you can tell that they're very smart and that they maybe want to communicate, but they can't. And so, especially early on when she regressed into autism and she lost language, you could tell that that was where most of her frustration came from, is that she wanted to communicate and she couldn't, especially in the early days. The best she could do sometimes was yell or tug on you to try and get your attention. And so it's got to be one of the most frustrating things, both for parents and for the children, is this desire to communicate, but the block that prevents it from happening. She started using the Speak All app just a few months ago. She had early on used a different application on something called a Dynavox, and she had some skill with that. But that was really clunky. It was a cumbersome machine. There was a lot to try and negotiate, and so the Speak All is much simpler and easier for her to negotiate, to manage, and she is able to pick up how you're supposed to use it really, really quickly, and she likes it because it is so simple in terms of its interface and how a child can figure out within just a few moments, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, and get a positive response from the adult or the clinic worker or the parent who's trying to communicate with her. The more she moves along in learning how to use the app, the more and more we'll be able to use it at home on our own. And so we're very excited about that. And she is thrilled, you can tell, to have the chance to communicate and to communicate easily. Because it used to be such a struggle for her just to explain to us her basic needs and wants. So this makes it much easier. At this point, we mostly use it in a rather controlled setting. We're expanding to more everyday use. As you can imagine, the problem with twins is whatever one has got, the other one wants as well. So yes, her sister is really great at using the Speak All as well, which I think makes it more attractive for Mallory, because not only does she do it, but her sister likes it too. And you can see her thinking, okay, this is something that lots of people like to work with, not just me. And so it makes it interesting for her, and also it helps to involve her sister in the therapy. In just the last month and a half, not only have we noticed this, and it's kind of hard when you're the parents because it's gradual, so every day we might notice something, and it's not as dramatic as for, say, her other therapists who perhaps see her once a week. They have said consistently every week, I can't believe how much she's progressed from last week. Today, I picked her up from occupational therapy, and her therapist there said, I can't believe how many I sentences she's trying to use and how easy the communication is between the two of us. So she's seeing dramatic improvement. Everyone who works with her has said in just the last few weeks they've seen dramatic improvement and also increased confidence in Mallory.
All right. I swear I didn't pay her to say those things. If you want some further information, we would love to share these parent intervention protocols and videos and tutorials, cheat sheets, and I'll pass this around. You will not be swamped with email. You can always unsubscribe. You might, however, get a product update and notification when the cloud-based services come out and these type of things. New apps are being released. You would be the first one to know. So while this thing is going around, further questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering, you mentioned that you're trying to avoid this organization system that uses just like categories, buckets. So I'm wondering, because I understand it's customizable. So I'm wondering how you, in the study, actually organized the icons.
Yeah, so my problem is I only brought one iPad and now this is going over. So, but we'll do. I'll show you on this thing. Maybe I can I pull up this interface? So we have this organized in activity sheets.
Do you want like an iPad adapter that you can just project?
Yeah. Do you have another one? With yeah.
In my office.
We did equip San Jose State University, all their iPads, with our Premium Plus version. So you should see Dr. Quirk for trying this out, and it's always going to be available to you. Yeah, so she was apparently saying they had a clunky Dynavox device. I honestly, I have very little. Yeah. It is surprising to me what people do and don't do in some of these school settings. It seems to be totally varying with whoever the speech language pathology is in charge and what classrooms they are in. Some classrooms do a fantastic job, at least trying to get them started early on PACS or some type of speech generating device. Other classrooms, I've been in classrooms in our community, there were 20 kids, all mostly severely involved. Some had severe autism, others have severe intellectual impairment, with one teacher and a few paras, and they do next to nothing to kind of help keep communication going. It's more of the sad story of, well, they're all being taken care of in some way, but there is no active, individualized program for everyone to work on their individual needs. And so in our community it varies quite a bit. West Lafayette High School, because most of the population there is professors, they have excellent support. If we go outside in the more rural areas in the state of Indiana, we see a different picture.
For the kids that kind of just do vocalization and speaking and stuff, is there a certain point where you start asking them to imitate the word, or is there a certain point? Or
Yeah, so I don't, we are making sure from the start on that there's always a verbal model provided with the reinforcer, so that they have a chance early on understanding this is a word for that graphic symbol, get that verbal input. We don't start that speech elicitation until they have progressed to that phase where they learn to discriminate between different graphic symbols. That's sort of I don't want to say it's more important than speech production, but it's a really critical skill to understand that different symbols stand for different things. In those first phases, all we are teaching them is more of a cause and effect relationship. They pick up that item and they pick up that picture card and exchange it, they get what they want. They don't have to necessarily look at it. They activate that symbol, don't have to necessarily look at it, and they get the desired item, right? So going from that stage to symbolic understanding and comprehension, there's different symbols on my screen and every symbol stands for something different. I'd like to make sure that is there first, because that to me seems to be like a strong foundation to build upon. Because even if I don't develop speech later on, I still have those symbolic skills and can link different symbols with different reference, and that symbol repertoire can expand no matter if they actually start saying words or not. See, do you get my point? So then once they get more fluent in composing these little sentences, I want plus desired item, then we put more emphasis on, hey, can you also try say it? Now it's your turn to say it. Let's do cookie or even Twizzler or this type of stuff. Yeah.
I want.
So is there a way that the students can sign up on here and then you can use this to show how you arranged?
No, the students can only sign up on that orange device. Do you have an iPad that I can use for demo?
So my
Oh, it's on there. Yeah, I can use it on here.
wow, there you go.
Well, already making sales here, isn't that wonderful? Is that the free version? Or?
Yeah, it's a free version.
Yeah, so it doesn't have the full functionality then.
Would you like to use mine?
Yeah, perfect.
you want the connector?
All right.
Do you have a connector?
Yeah, I have a connector.
You do have a connector?
Yes.
All right. So now I have
Is that
to.
the new iPad though?
All right, we need this connector. Alright, that projector is awkward. You know what I might want to do, because you're getting the wrong impression here, I'm just going to stand in front of you and kind of explain a few things. Alright, so that is the starting page, and you can easily get to the user manual. You can get to... You can get to those tutorials that are on YouTube. You may not have internet connection in here. Our website is on there. Any feedback you want to send, you have an immediate need for help. This goes directly to the programmer. And then let's go into play mode. This goes back to that question how the vocabulary is organized. We are setting up so-called activity sheets, and these activity sheets could be foods, they could be basic wants and needs, another sheet for basic wants and needs. We can have an activity sheet for colors, we can have an activity sheet for different types of people. And then I can browse through these activity sheets here on the very top portion, and if I have a lot of symbols in one activity sheet, I can also, with a little swipe, go back and forth within a sheet. And this is a way to avoid too much of a categorical organization, because I never have to go from a subordinate category to a one below and one below, because the screen never changes. I'm selecting my different contexts up here, and then within the context, I get a new selection area, and I can start dragging symbols down. I can also go combine those symbols with the ones from another activity sheet, and within each one, I can go back and forth. All right. I can turn on and turn off those activity sheets if I wanted to start out very, very simple. I go to learner settings, select my learner, let me go back, let me see. Okay. For different learners, I can set up different learner profiles, and I can put on and off those activity sheets by putting the X's or the check marks on. Right? Then I go back into play mode, and then all that's on there, this is actually the library, how to organize it. And then all that's on there is just one sheet, very simple, and then it doesn't have this area on the top. If you wanted to start just very simple and not have those activity sheets on the top, if this is too much to handle for starting for a beginning communicator, then you do just one activity sheet and go.
Yes, no, many.
Somehow it got.
Oh, somehow we got into the actual app, and we want to go back into signing up. All right, there we go. Okay. Under learner settings, we can switch from one touch, which is automatic activation as soon as I'm touching the symbol. We can shift that to drag and drop, which is more of me than dragging and dropping down symbols on that sentence strip. Order activity means the way that these activity sheets on the top, the way they are being displayed, that can be organized, that you are setting priorities. You want foods and toys to come first before you want colors, emotional needs and other stuff. Or you organize that by usage. So the symbols that the individual most often uses, those activity sheets come first, followed by those that are not as often used. Then those most frequent symbols would always be more readily available. Then tile reset order is shuffle versus original. Goes back to my earlier discussion. In the beginning, when teaching an initial symbol vocabulary, it might make sense to turn that randomization function on. Then the items are always reshuffled.
T-shirt, shoe.
And with every reset, I'm having a different array of symbols on the display. As my graphic symbol vocabulary grows, then I might be becoming counterproductive because the learner may want to get to certain symbols right away, fairly easy. So I go back, go into learner settings to put in original, and then the symbols always stay on the exact same location.
Goodbye.
I'm doing something down here. I'm starting over.
Wrong.
And
Hello.
I go back into the original location for that purpose. Like I told your colleague, very important at a certain stage to make sure they have symbol discrimination, that they have an understanding that different symbols stand for different things. The randomization portion makes them having to search. It's never at the same location. And that way, we are preventing them from learning some automated motor sequence, such as always going, like, I'm always going to go, I want this, this. I want this, right? If the I want switches around, this automaticity is a little bit prevented. Later on, when symbol vocabulary grows, automaticity isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you got to have the understanding first, like you're driving a car. And at a certain point, well, I'm from Europe, so we have the clutch and the stick. So at a certain point, automaticity is good. You know, I know exactly what motor movements to do to switch from gear 1 to 2 to 3 and 4. But initially, I had to learn what is the clutch for, what is the brake for, what is the gas for, and what is the stick for, right? If I would just randomly, I would just always go in the same sequence, putting those pedals down, that I wouldn't have learned to drive. So you get my point? Initially, for initial learning, we might need to make sure they always look at it and they know the individual symbols. All right, I don't want to bore you too much with. So I know you're tired and you've been hanging in here. Any other questions before?
The girls, are they identical or fraternal twins?
Yeah.
Are they fraternal or?
I don't know. This was a surprise to me that she had a twin sister that was completely normal. I would have assumed if this runs in families and has this very strong genetic components, then both would be affected. But this other kid was just perfectly fine. So they told me this. Listen to this. They told me that there is a theory out there that in twins, one child might regress into autism if that twin doesn't get as much attention as the other. I have never heard this before, and I don't know how much scientific evidence there is for this. It seems to be more of a funny notion. But that is what they are thinking. Because she was somewhat normal in the beginning, and then you heard her say she regressed into autism. And she feels that one of the twins got more attention than the other, and this may have triggered that she got autistic also. It might just be a wrong coping mechanism, that she kind of needs a reason to know why one of her daughters is autistic and the other one is not.
Program on, I think it was CNN, all boys, and then 4 had autism, and they were a year old. So the whole team was wiped out.
Right. Am I supposed to hand out those certificates?
No, well.
How does that work?
You can have people pick them up. Are you done?
Do we have some more questions? I think they're all ready to be relieved.
So I just want to thank Dr. Wickman.
I've enjoyed this very much. This was a great interaction. You're only the second group where I've done this type of training with. So thank you very much. I've really benefited from all your comments, from your strong questions, and this really helps me to put on a better presentation, refine the product, come back with new ideas and so forth. So thanks again. This was really great.
Please don't forget to sign up and